The reason why I don't recommend for most of you, if not all of you, why I don't recommend multivariate testing is because it takes a substantial amount of traffic for you to get confirmation on which combination. Think of it this way. Think of, if you make three different changes, think of right, you've got, let's say, headline one and picture one, headline one and picture two, headline two and picture one, headline two and picture two, right? Headline one, picture one, background one, headline one, picture one, background two, and so on. You've got so many combinations, so you need enough traffic for every one of those variations in order to reach any kind of statistical validity. And that's why what we do is we run and use simple A/B split tests. And the reason is that what we're doing is we're looking for a winner as quickly as we can, right? So it's kind of like what we always do is we always start with a control. Right? And so the control could be the current version that you have. So you've got a current version, right? Let's say you're starting off with one sales page. And so you've got one version right now. That version becomes the control. You've got X% sales conversion, let's just say on it, or X% opt-in rate on it. And so you've got one version and you've got base level metrics. Obviously, before you do any kind of split testing, any kind of A/B testing, you need base level metrics. So you have to be tracking, you have to be measuring, right? You never want to make any change without first measuring the result or the impact before the change. And so let's say we've got this one version, we call it the control, we get a baseline measurement on it. And this is why I say to you guys and gals that you always want to take whatever it is that you have and you always want to roll it out and you always want to get some data, because the data gives us that baseline measurement so that we can begin testing. You can't begin testing until you've got a baseline measurement. You can't begin optimizing until you've got this baseline measurement. And so that's what we do. And then what we do is we set up what's called a variation. Now, when you set up a variation, the right way to do this, is you want to change one thing. So if, let's say, you wanted to test the headline and you wanted to test the image, you pick the one that you feel will have the biggest impact, right? And often you might just have to guess. You might have to use your intuition a little bit here of what you feel would have the biggest impact, but you pick one, right? So and you might think, let me test, font size, let me test background color, whatever, right? And I recommend that you test the things that scream, not the things that whisper. Right? So you test the things that scream. Test the things that you think can double your conversion rate, not the things that you think are going to increase conversions by, 0.3% or something like that. Test the things that scream. Test the idea. Test the headline. Test the offer. Right? Those are the things that can have a huge impact. Test the lead. Right? Those are the things that can really move the needle in a big way. Those are the things that scream. But so you want to pick one thing at a time. So you pick one thing and you run a test on that. And like if you're going to change the headline, you change the headline. You don't change the font size. You don't change the font. You don't change the color. You change one thing at a time. That doesn't mean one word, right? But if you're going to change the headline, you change the headline and you leave everything else. And that's what you do. You set up this variation. And so in this case, that variation might have a different headline. And then you run an A/B split test. Now, in order to do the A/B split test the right way, you want to split traffic at the same time. So the thing that you don't want to do is you don't want to run the control, right, for 5 days and then switch over and run the variation for 5 days. And that's really what JMC was asking. He was asking, do you run like the control for a few days and then switch over and run the variation for a few days? You don't do that. And the reason why you don't do that is because external factors could impact the conversion rate. For example, if something happens in the news, the economy tanks, the stock market takes a beating one day and people are a little fearful, something happened, God forbid, a terrorist attack or something like that. Or, right, there could be a major sporting event, there could be a major holiday, right? Any of these outside factors could impact the conversion rate on a particular day. And so what we want to do is we just want to split the traffic. And typically what we do is we do this 50-50. So we just split the traffic. Half the traffic will go to the control, half the traffic will go to the variation. And the way that this is typically done by the most basic A/B split testing applications, is you get a like I'll explain it this way. Like you get like let's say inside of an application like ClickFunnels. So what ClickFunnels does is ClickFunnels gives you a main URL, a main URL. And this is the URL that you would use in an ad. So you run your ad and you send the ad to the main URL. And then the main URL will automatically redirect whatever percentage of traffic you tell it to the control, and the other percentage of traffic to the variation. So we'll send 50 here, 50% and 50% here. And so for JMC, the thing is that you're not changing the URL in the ad. You never need to change the URL in the ad. The URL in the ad remains the same. And what happens when somebody hits that URL is it automatically gets divided between the variations. Because the reason why you want to do it this way. Let me just do something here. Let's change this up for a second. The reason why you want to do it this way is because let's say this one doesn't do as well as the control, right? So this variation doesn't do as well, right? It does less than this percentage, whatever it is that we're monitoring. If in the example of a sales page, we're monitoring sales conversion rate, this one doesn't do as well as the control. We might then want to set up another variation. We stop running this one and we create variation 2, right? And we run another headline. Well, when you have this kind of setup, you're not changing the main URL in any of your ads or any of your external advertisements. What happens is when they hit this main URL, they just get redirected. 50% will go to the control again, and now 50% will go to this variation. And so the main URL never changes. What happens after they hit the main URL is can change based on your variations. And there's a lot of split testing tools out there that work that way, meaning, right, you're going to use one URL to send the traffic to, and when they hit that URL, they'll automatically be split between two different variations. There are even applications today like Visual Website Optimizer, for example, was one that we used to use that I really liked a lot. Visual Website Optimizer allowed you to just place a piece of code on the page, and there was actually just one URL, and you were able to place a piece of code on the page, and then you were able to make the changes that you want. And when somebody goes through with something like Visual Website Optimizer, when somebody went to the main URL, that code would cycle through the different headlines, and then it would show you the winner. So again, you're never changing the URL in the ad. That is always the same. This way you don't have to change ads, you don't have to lose your social proof or anything like that. And so hopefully that makes sense. And so let's get rid of that. And so that answers the second part of JMC's question. Now let's take a look at the difference in pages here. And the first thing that I want to point out is this. So JMC said that he's the new offer, which is this page right here. So this is the new version of the sales page. And it looks like you could see, what was changed over here. And JMC said, that he's been running the new offer for 5 days, but it looks like it's not converting as well as the previous page. And so that's very common, right? Like, I want you to understand that, there are times when I'll make a change to a page, we'll test things and the test doesn't perform as well. What I would really say to you guys and gals is more often than not, your test pages, your variation pages won't perform as well. If it was common, if they mostly did, my gosh, it would be this endless, this endless amount of improvements that you'd be making. Oftentimes, you'll have to run several variations before you find a winner. It's why many years ago, some of the best copywriters in the world, guys like Gary Bencivenga, for example, he had a control that couldn't be beat for years, meaning lots of people stepped up and tried to run new variations, tried to run new campaigns, new promos, and just were not able to beat the performance of his, which is why it remained the control. The control is is either when you're just starting out, your very first version, or over time, the control is going to be the best performing page for you, whatever it is that you are measuring it on. If it's an opt-in page, opt-in rate. If it's a sales page, sales conversion rate. If it's an order form, it's, it might be order form completion rate, and so on. And so that's very common, right? So don't think that, you might fall in love with the improvements, but it doesn't matter what we like. It only matters what the numbers say. And so what you want to do is, if you're running, when you run the split test, and one of the most important things is that you run the split test, you run your split test long enough for statistical validity. So if you're using, something like ClickFunnels, it's built in. It'll tell you when you've reached, like, what the likelihood of one of them being a winner is. If you use, the free split testing tool built into Google Analytics, it'll tell you when you've reached statistical significance. The key is that you don't stop running the test until you've got a statistically valid test, because far too many marketers will end tests too early, thinking that they don't have a winner, and they really do have a winner, and it's just that they didn't let the test go long enough. Or they will think that they do have a winner with the new variation, and they just didn't let it run long enough, and really the variation wasn't a winner, it's a loser. And if they ran the test long enough, again, most of the applications today will tell you when you've got statistical significance. At a bare minimum, we will, again, this is bare minimum, we run a minimum of 100 visitors to each page. And so that just means, in this, you need a minimum of 100 people here and a minimum of 100 people here to hit the page. Sometimes you'll find that the sales conversion rate will be so close that it's not significant which one the winner is, right? Like, in other words, and you got to let it continue to run. Don't rush your tests. Let the tests play out for you to find a winner, right? And obviously, the more traffic that you send to an offer, and the faster you send that traffic, the faster you can reach statistical significance. And so, the fact that the new version didn't do as well is very common. And so let's take a look at this. And so, right, sometimes I may, like this is an example, like sometimes I may go back and give comments on things that were on a page on the prior, like I'm going to point something out in a second that is obviously on the control as well here. But, so let's take a look at this. And so the first thing that I would say with both of these, but especially this one right here, is I don't like all the differences in colors, right? And so we've got this, I'm not even sure what you call this up here. This is a lavender, kind of dark lavender. And then we've got this light headline over here, right? So we've got this color, we've got this color, we've got this red over here in this bad boy. We've got this green button, this green arrow over here. And so it just becomes noisy. And I know that, like, look, I've had tests, like Damien has run tests before where it was like disgusting, and the disgusting looking headline won. But I would tell you that I always lean in favor of having some sort of color palette and sticking with that color palette, and only having maybe three different colors max in the entire promotion. And so when I use different colors, like if I'm going to incorporate, like, let's say the only time I might bring in a fourth color is if I do some sort of highlight. So I might have like a yellow highlight on some of these, things over here. But I would just keep I would keep a color palette throughout, because I think that it's much more visually appealing. And I think that if you're going to depending on the demographic, like a female-oriented market, I think it's even much more important that you've got a visually appealing page. And so the thing that I would point out with that, because I don't want anybody to misunderstand me, right? The look and feel, the design won't make the sale for you, but it will certainly support the sale, right? So, like, I'm not saying that design in and of itself will make the sale. That's not what I'm saying at all. But I'm saying that certainly, like, if you've got the copy nailed, right, there's certainly nothing wrong with supporting it with a nice, visually appealing looking page. With that, I don't like the color. I just think that it's too light over here, and so I would certainly darken this up a little bit. Um, I also think that while I like this, the scary mushroom over here, like it's got that curiosity factor, it's got that little clickbaity factor, which I'm saying that is a positive thing in here. I don't think that that has a place on this type of sales letter. Like I think that you just risk turning off moms by seeing that on this page. I think that it's much more appealing to see a smiling child having fun, right? Because that's really ultimately what these parents are concerned about. They want their kids to eat better foods, and to have fun doing it, and to not throw tantrums. And so I really think, especially because this has a very positive feel, it's very towards oriented, right? Towards something positive. And so I would keep it that way. And so I don't like this. I'd get rid of this. This over here, over 400 children are using this mealtime tool, and feedback has been remarkable. I also don't think that I don't like the number, because I don't think that 400 sounds a lot. Like to me, this is almost one of those things where, it can almost come off as negative social proof, and so, right, because obviously there are millions and millions of kids. And so 400 just doesn't seem like a lot. If it was thousands, right, or if it was over 400 children start using this every week, that's different, right? But just to say over 400 children are using this mealtime tool and feedback has been remarkable, I just think the number is too small. And so this is one of those things where two things, right? Number one, if the proof that you have is too small, I either would not use it, or I would figure out a different way to present it. And what I mean by that is, like, let's say you were selling a money making thing, and right, like, somebody's made, I don't even know, whatever, $1,000 using this thing. Uh, and you're in a market where $1,000 of extra money isn't a lot for the audience, let's just say. Well, maybe we would talk about, right, they're making an extra, $50 an hour now, right? Or this is the equivalent of adding an extra, whatever it is, $7 a minute. Imagine if you were making an extra $7 every minute of the day. Like, I would see if there is a better way to present that number so that it's more attractive.